Psychologists generally define forgiveness as a decision to release feelings of resentment towards something or someone who has harmed you, regardless of whether they actually deserve it. I think that last part is really key to beginning to understand forgiveness, because it highlights that forgiveness is not really about the wrongdoing or the wrongdoer at all. It's actually about the person who has been wronged. I think as a society, we often look at forgiveness as condoning wrongdoing or freeing the conscience of the person who is wronged. In reality, forgiveness is an act of liberation, not for the person who requires it, but for the person who must give it. You see, when we choose to forgive, we are giving up on grudges and burdens that would hold us back. By forgiving, we are starting to move on, to heal. Think of a grudge as a burning coal. You can hold on to it as long as you like, thinking about how much you would like to throw it at someone else. At the end of the day, you will still be the only person that it burns. So, in theory, we should all just drop the coal. Let it go, forgive, allow the burns to heal. I say in theory because forgiveness is not as simple as dropping a burning coal. Forgiving someone is hard, and forgiving yourself is harder. Self-forgiveness is really hard, I think in part, because in a world where a lot is out of our control, blaming or holding a grudge against ourselves is a way of getting that control back. I make a bad decision, I can't control the consequences. What's done is done. What I can control is my reaction. I can force myself to hold that hot coal of a grudge, perhaps as some form of self-punishment, some way to make myself feel like I'm in control. There's nowhere I have found self-forgiveness harder than in my time playing field hockey, especially as a defender. For those who don't know, in field hockey, if the ball touches a defending player's foot in their circle, which are those semicircles at the end of the field, a short corner is awarded. A short corner is essentially a 5-on-11, and it increases the opposing team's chance of scoring by at least 50%. For good teams, it's more like 75 to 80. So, general rule of thumb is you don't want your foot to touch the ball in your circle. However, this is a rule I tend to break a lot. And as a result, I've been responsible for a lot of goals scored against my own team. And yes, now one could argue that field hockey is a team sport, and thus one single person's failures cannot be held responsible for winning or losing a game. And I agree with this when it applies to others. I'm sure many of you, whether you play a team sport or are part of any group working towards a common goal, can relate that when teammates make mistakes, it wouldn't even cross our minds to blame them. You win as a team and you lose as a team. And this applies to every single teammate, but not to myself, obviously. No, when I make a mistake, cost a goal, or even a game, it is solely my fault. And every time it happens, I'll spend the rest of the game, the day, maybe even the week thinking about it. I find it so hard to forgive myself in moments like these. Even if no one else notices my mistakes, I do, and I make sure to remember them. For a really long time, this habit, no doubt, made my playing way worse. Every time I made a mistake on the field, I fell deeper and deeper into my own head. I couldn't move on from my mistakes. They distracted me and made me unsure of my own playing ability. My inability to forgive was hurting me, making me a worse player and probably a worse teammate. I'm sure many of you have been a part of a lot of different teams, on the pitch and off. And I'm also sure that if many of you look back, you could recognize which teams worked and which failed to. If you reflect back on these teams that worked, what made them work? Why did you enjoy being a part of them? I could wager that a common value within those teams, whether said or not, was forgiveness. When a community or team chooses to value and prioritize forgiveness, there's far less of a blame game going on. It's not about the mistakes, it's about the growth. And this culture is one of success. It's one worth fostering. I know this culture is one which all teams try to create, and it is a culture that is only really tested in the hardest moments. The test for last year's Appleby field hockey team came in our final game, where, I won't lie, we were losing by a lot. I won't get into specifics because it hurts to even say out loud, but it was a lot. So I was already pretty upset with myself. As a defender, it's literally in the title. Your primary goal is to defend. And the higher the score got, the more I felt like I was failing. Sure, there were 10 other players on the field, but of course, us losing was all my fault. When the game finally ended, I was ready to cry. Anyone who knows me can tell you I hate losing, no matter what. But in this moment, I hated myself more than I hated that we lost, because I felt like I was the reason. And as we walked back to the bus as a team, all I could think about was how badly I played. Up until one of my teammates came up to me, and to my surprise, she had come to compliment me on my playing. And I remember looking at her like she had lost her mind, and telling her so. I even apologized to her for how I played. She seemed shocked at my reaction. I distinctly remember her saying, "You're a bit too hard on yourself, don't you think?" These words really stuck with me, and I spent the entire bus ride back thinking about the game and her words. I began to realize that maybe I had had some good moments in the game, that I really had tried my best. I had laid it all out on the field, and while it wasn't enough to win, it wasn't insignificant either. Without the culture of forgiveness and love that existed on that team, I don't think I would have ever been able to feel good about myself after a loss. Without that teammate's encouragement and a culture that didn't focus on individual mistakes, I wouldn't have been able to realize two very important things. One, the world doesn't revolve around me. I know, this was a shocker. So just because I make a mistake does not mean everyone has noticed, because I guess not everyone's obsessed with me like I am. And number two is that I play worse when I don't forgive myself for making mistakes. I play way more timidly when I'm scared of my own criticism. And it was with these realizations that I came to the conclusion that maybe by forgiving myself, I could actually make myself a better player and a better teammate. Now, it definitely wasn't or is easy, but ever since realizing this, I've really tried to forgive myself, to let myself make mistakes, and to treat myself with the same forgiveness and respect that I do my teammates. Now, it doesn't always work out. It wasn't like I turned a switch and was suddenly so nice to myself, but I don't obsess over my mistakes like I used to. I forgive and I move on, and that is why forgiveness is liberation. It's this perception of forgiveness that I also then began to apply not only to myself, but to others. And it's also what I urge all of you to do. Holding on to other people's mistakes, to the hurt they caused, the burning coals doesn't do us any good. There is no point in burning yourself. I think part of the reason we tend to want to hold back forgiveness is because we associate it with a second chance. And while I am a firm believer in second chances, I wouldn't have my G2 without one, they are not necessary for forgiveness. You can forgive and move on without ever giving a second chance. In fact, sometimes it's for the better that we don't give second chances. And that was honestly one of the hardest things I think any of us, including myself, will ever have to reconcile with. You see, you don't get second chances in games. A goal is a goal. Same as you don't get second chances on tests. Though if any teacher is offering, I will gladly take them up on it. If anything, the rarity of second chances is what makes them such a valuable thing. Now, I'm not up here saying never give second chances. I think we should all look for the best in people and offer second chances when we can. But I am up here saying I think we should treat second chances as the gifts that they are. Because sometimes you get one shot, and it doesn't always work out. Sometimes things are meant to end, friendships are meant to go, people are meant to move on. Sometimes you're meant to fail. And that sucks, don't get me wrong. But that doesn't mean that there was no joy or happiness that came from those situations. And it doesn't mean that there can be no forgiveness. It definitely isn't easy. It's not even something I think I would say I'm good at. And I like to think I'm good at a lot of things. In fact, when I told my family I was planning on writing my chapel speech on the topic of forgiveness, they looked at me like I had told them I was dropping out of high school. I believe my sister's exact words were, "Isn't it supposed to be something you know a lot about?" And in some ways, they're right. Forgiveness is not something I have had a great track record with. Like I said at the beginning of this speech, it's something I struggle with a lot. And I don't think I'm alone in that struggle. But it's also something I think both I, as well as everyone here, can try to work on more. Forgiveness can occur in big moments, like choosing to forgive a friend when they do something that hurts you, or forgiving yourself after a bad test. But it can also occur in tiny moments, like forgiving your friends for interrupting you, forgiving the strangers who talk loudly in the library, or even forgiving yourself for sleeping in too late. Big moments of forgiveness are important, but so are the little ones. And if we all work on forgiving in both big and small moments, we will all be contributing to a community filled with more love and compassion than hate. So I urge you to forgive, to value the second chances you're given, and above all, to be a bit kinder to yourselves. I mean, just think, if goldfish can forgive, then you probably can too. Okay, thank you.